The yard buzzed with the kind of quiet tension that only existed behind bars, a silence full of eyes, of waiting. It wasn't peaceful silence, it was the kind that came right before something broke. The air smelled of sweat, metal, and disinfectant, thick under the mid-morning sun that poured down on gray concrete. Every inmate knew where he belonged in the yard. There were invisible lines, racial lines, gang lines, respect lines. Step over one without meaning to, and you could bleed before you realized why. Marcus Reed didn't belong anywhere yet. 3 days inside, and already he'd drawn stares, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he carried himself like someone who wasn't afraid. He moved with the quiet precision of a man who understood space, timing, and danger. He didn't pace or slouch like most men did in here. He stood still, observant, calm. That made people uneasy. He sat on a cold bench near the weights, his back to the wall, hands loose between his knees. The sun caught the edges of his short-cropped hair, glinting off the faint scar that traced from his temple to his jaw. His eyes were dark, still, always scanning, not nervously, just naturally, like a reflex too deep to turn off. He'd been trained that way once. The habit stayed, even if the uniform didn't. A guard on the tower above him leaned forward and whispered to another. They both looked at Marcus, then looked away. No one knew his story yet. Rumors flew fast in a place like this, though. Some said he was ex-military. Others thought he'd been a mercenary or a cop who'd killed the wrong man. No one guessed that the truth was worse, that Marcus had been dealt a force, a commander, the kind of man whose missions didn't make it into the news. But in here, none of that mattered. He was just another inmate in orange. Another number. He watched the yard with quiet detachment. Near the fence, a group of Latinos huddled around a card game. By the basketball court, a few bikers smoked and traded stories. The black inmates mostly stayed on the far side, talking low. And in the middle of it all, by the pull-up bars, the Kings of C Block ran their little empire. Razor was their leader, lean, tattooed, mean eyes, the kind of man who'd stab you for looking too long at his shoes. He'd been watching Marcus since the first day. Razor didn't like calm men. Calm meant control, and control was power. You didn't show power unless you could back it up, and Razor made sure no one did unless it was him. Marcus had already caught him watching twice. He didn't react, just met his stare, then turned away. That alone was enough to set Razor off. Now, as Marcus sat there under the hard sun, he felt the shift, that subtle change in the air when trouble was coming. The way conversations near him died down. The way movement slowed. It was instinct more than awareness. He didn't even look up when he heard Razor's boots crunch on the concrete. "Yo, new guy," Razor called. His voice carried across the yard. "You deaf or just rude?" Marcus lifted his eyes, calm and steady. "Neither." Razor smirked. "Then you know it's polite to answer when someone speaks to you." He stopped a few feet away, his crew fanning out behind him, 5 men in total, all hard eyes and restless hands. "I heard you think you're some kinda tough guy," Razor said. "I don't think anything," Marcus replied evenly. That tone, measured, even, hit Razor harder than any insult could. It wasn't fear. It wasn't defiance. It was dismissal. The gang leader chuckled, stepping closer, his breath carrying the bitter tang of cigarettes. "See, that's the thing. In here, you don't get to think you're above the rules. You earn your spot. You pay respect." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "Respect's not payment. It's recognition." A few of Razor's men snickered. The leader's eyes narrowed. "You got a smart mouth for a man who doesn't know what happens to smart mouths." Marcus didn't move, didn't blink. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't." That calm, that stillness, it was wrong in this place. It threw everyone off. Razor hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for his ego to catch up to his instinct. Then he smirked again and spat to the side. "Enjoy your last quiet meal, tough guy. Tomorrow, we'll see if you're still smiling." Marcus didn't answer. He just watched them walk away, his gaze thoughtful, almost tired. He'd seen men like Razor before, in other prisons, in other parts of the world, wearing uniforms instead of tattoos. Men who mistook fear for respect. And Marcus Reed had learned long ago that when those men came for you, you didn't warn them. You just waited. The next morning came heavy with the kind of tension that settles before a storm. Breakfast in the mess hall was louder than usual, spoons clattering, trays slamming, voices raised just enough to hide the whispers underneath. Word had gotten around fast. Razor and his crew were going to make a move. Everyone knew it. Everyone also knew better than to warn the new guy. Marcus sat alone at a corner table, methodically eating his oatmeal as if the entire room wasn't watching him. His posture was the same as always, straight, relaxed, unbothered. He didn't glance at Razor's table. Didn't need to. He already knew the plan. It was in the way Razor kept glancing toward the clock, in the way one of his men slipped something shiny into his sleeve. Marcus had seen this pattern in 100 different versions: ambushes in alleys, traps in deserts, assaults in the dead of night. The setting changed. The rhythm didn't. When the yard opened after breakfast, Marcus was one of the first out. He didn't run or hide. He went to the showers, same as always. Routine was safety here. It made people predictable. He undressed slowly, folded his clothes, and stepped under the cold spray. The concrete walls echoed with the low hum of pipes and distant voices. For a few seconds, it was just him and the sound of water. Then he heard it, the soft scuff of boots against wet floor, too controlled to be casual. 5 shadows stretched across the tiles. Razor came first, smirking, a towel draped over his shoulders like a taunt. Behind him, his men fanned out, blocking the exit. Steam drifted between them like smoke before battle. "Morning, soldier boy," Razor said. "Hope you slept well. You'll need the energy." Marcus turned off the water, silent. Drops rolled down his shoulders, muscles tightening, breath slow and even. He didn't reach for the towel. Didn't show a flicker of concern. Nothing to say. Razor tilted his head. "Man, you really think being quiet makes you scary?" Marcus looked at him. Not at the knife hidden in Razor's waistband, not at the men shifting behind him, just at him. Calm. Level. "You don't want to do this." That single sentence made the gang leader laugh, short and sharp. "Oh, I want to. You made me look stupid yesterday. Can't have that." Razor snapped his fingers. One of his men stepped forward, swinging fast. The mistake was in the swing. Wild, heavy, all shoulders. Marcus moved before the punch connected, stepping inside the man's reach. A single motion, hand on wrist, pivot of the hips, and the man went airborne, crashing against the tile wall with a wet crack. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the second came at him, shouting. Marcus ducked, drove an elbow into his ribs, spun, and took him down with the precision of someone who didn't fight for anger or fear, only necessity. Razor's grin faded. The others hesitated, but pride and peer pressure pushed them forward. 2 came at once. Marcus sidestepped, blocked one strike, twisted another's wrist until the blade clattered on the floor. He kicked it away, sent both sprawling, and turned just as Razor lunged. The leader swung a sharpened shiv, aiming high. Marcus caught his wrist mid-swing, twisting until Razor's knees buckled. The weapon dropped. Marcus didn't use it. He shoved Razor backward, into the wall, pinning him there with one hand around his throat. "You done?" Marcus asked softly. Razor struggled, gasping, eyes wide. He'd seen men fight before, but not like this. Marcus wasn't angry. He wasn't even breathing hard. It was precision, the kind of violence that came from training, not rage. You military," Razor choked out. Marcus's expression didn't change. He released him and stepped back. Razor dropped to the floor, coughing, humiliated and shaking. The door slammed open. Guards poured in, shouting for everyone to freeze. Marcus raised his hands immediately, calm as ever. Razor's men sprawled across the floor, some clutching ribs, one groaning in pain, another crawling away. "What the hell happened here?" One guard barked. "Self-defense," Marcus said quietly. The sergeant in charge squinted at him. Older man, grizzled, the kind who'd seen plenty of fights. His eyes caught on the tattoo inked faintly on Marcus's forearm, a black triangle, wings etched into its base. Recognition flickered. He stepped closer. "Where'd you get that ink, inmate?" Marcus didn't answer. The sergeant's tone softened. "That's not just a mark. That's Delta." The room went dead silent. Even Razor, still wheezing on the floor, stared in disbelief. "You're him," Razor whispered. The ghost from Kandahar. That story was real. Marcus's jaw tightened. Stories are just stories. The sergeant nodded slowly, eyes narrowing with something between respect and unease. Not this one, he murmured. Marcus was escorted out quietly, not cuffed, not shoved, just followed. The guards didn't know what to make of him, and the inmates in the hallway pressed themselves against the walls as he passed. He wasn't just another prisoner anymore. He was something else. Something dangerous, disciplined, untouchable. And as the steel door clanged shut behind him, Razor sat against the wall of the showers, clutching his bruised neck, the realization settling in like ice. They hadn't jumped a man. They'd picked a fight with a legend. The prison moved differently after that day. Whispers traveled faster than the guards could stop them, weaving from block to block until Marcus Reed became less of a man and more of a rumor. Some said he'd killed 30 men in Afghanistan with his bare hands. Others swore he'd been part of secret missions the government still denied existed. Razor's gang didn't say much at all. They healed in silence, nursing bruises and shame. In a place where power meant survival, being beaten by one man, and a quiet one at that, was a wound worse than broken bones. Marcus went back to his routine as if nothing had changed. Mornings in the yard, afternoons in the workshop, evenings reading whatever books he could get from the small, dusty library. He didn't seek company, and no one offered it. Even the guards, who usually threw their weight around, treated him with careful neutrality. They didn't fear him exactly. They respected the kind of calm that came from someone who'd seen things worse than prison walls. A week after the fight, he was called to the warden's office. The walk there was long and quiet, the kind of silence that always came before judgment. Inside, the warden sat behind his desk, reading a thin file. The sergeant who'd broken up the fight stood by the wall, arms folded. "You've been busy, Reed," the warden said, finally looking up. 5 men injured. Razor's got a fractured wrist. 2 concussions. You want to tell me how you managed all that without leaving a single bruise on yourself? Marcus didn't answer right away. "I defended myself." The warden studied him. "You've got training. Serious training." Marcus didn't confirm or deny it. The warden leaned back, exhaling. "Sergeant tells me you were Special Forces. Delta, right?" Marcus's gaze remained steady. "That part of my life is over. Maybe. But you should know, it's not every day a man like you ends up here. Some people might take an interest in that." Marcus didn't ask who. He didn't need to. There were always people watching, inside and outside. The kind who saw soldiers as tools, not men. He'd spent years being used that way. He had no intention of going back. The warden sighed. "You're not in trouble, Reed. In fact, I'd say you might have done us a favor. Razor and his crew have been a problem for months. But I can't have my prison turning into a war zone. Keep your head down. We'll forget this happened." Marcus nodded once. "That's all I want." He left the office and returned to his cell, where the air was thick and still. That night, the prison was quieter than usual. No shouts, no laughter, no threats echoing through the corridors. Just the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant clang of metal doors. A soft knock came from the cell bars. Razor stood there. His wrist was wrapped in a bandage, eyes hollow but clear. Marcus looked up from his book. "You lost." Razor shook his head. "No, I came to talk." There was a pause, long enough for the hum of the light to fill it. Razor's voice was lower than usual, stripped of its bravado. "I didn't know who you were. None of us did. If we had..." He trailed off, shaking his head again. "You could have killed us." "I didn't want to," Marcus said. "That's what scares me." Razor leaned closer to the bars. "You're different. You don't act like the rest of us. You don't belong here." Marcus closed his book, resting it on his knee. "Maybe not, but I'm here anyway." Razor hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Guess that makes 2 of us, in different ways." For the first time, Marcus saw something almost human in the man. The flicker of someone who'd made one too many bad choices and run out of exits. Razor's voice dropped even lower. "Word is, you could help a lot of people in here. Teach them how to protect themselves. Not to start fights, to survive them." Marcus studied him for a moment. "Why would you want that?" Razor looked away. "Because maybe if more men knew how to fight right, they wouldn't fight wrong." There was truth in that, and Marcus recognized it. He nodded once. "I'll think about it." Razor gave a small, grim smile. "Fair enough." Then he left, his footsteps fading into the corridor. Weeks passed. Marcus began running early morning workouts in the yard. Nothing official. Just stretches, drills, discipline. A few inmates joined, then a few more. Razor came, too, keeping quiet, following orders like everyone else. Something shifted in the prison after that. The tension didn't vanish, but it changed shape. Less chaos, more structure. Even the guards noticed. One cold morning, as the first light spilled over the walls, the sergeant from before passed by the yard. He paused, watching Marcus lead a line of men through exercises. "You sure you don't want to come back to the world, Reed?" he called. "Men like you don't belong behind fences." Marcus glanced over, a faint smile ghosting across his face. "Maybe not," he said. "But sometimes the world still finds you here." And as the sun rose higher, warming the cracked concrete, the yard filled not with violence, but with movement. Quiet, disciplined, almost peaceful. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt something close to purpose. Not as a soldier, not as an inmate, but as a man who had finally stopped running from who he was.